We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio, head coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I remain your host, Mark Angelides, and we continue to be joined by Liberty Nation's executive editor, Leesa K. So, Leesa, earlier in the show, we were discussing the new Gaza movement, Make Gaza Great Again, Make Gaza Great Again, and of course, how the legacy media has been covering that. But yes, I'd like to move on to talk about what Donald Trump has been doing, what the administration has been doing, and what that means for America. And I think maybe to kick this off, let's talk USAID or USAID, as some people do say it, because they're convinced that it's got something to do with charity work, which is obviously not the case, is it, Leesa?
No, it is not the case. USAID stands for the United States Agency for International Development. It's actually a way to embed the U.S. into other nations. And places like the State Department and ultimately the CIA use this as what's known as soft power, right? I mean, you don't always go in with guns ablaze, or before you go in with guns ablaze, you better know the community really well and the country really well. But anyway, this is ballooned beyond any kind of recognizable proportion. It's now at $72 billion in 2023. We gave 72 B as in billion dollars to other countries through USAID. So I did a little research and let me go through it. Here's a short breakdown. 16 billion to Ukraine, 1.6 billion to Ethiopia, 1.9 billion to Jordan, 1 billion to Afghanistan. You can imagine when we were in the Afghanistan war what that might have been.
Yeah.
Wait. And in the vicinity of 1 billion for Somalia, the Congo, Syria, Nigeria, Yemen, and South Sudan. That's a lot of money.
I mean, that's really just the tip of the iceberg, though. That's direct to countries for specific reasons. And then, of course, you've got the programs that are being sponsored that take place within those countries as well, you've looked a lot into this, Leesa. You did a great article on the page of libertynation.com where you dove quite deeply into some of the various things that's happening in this arena. But correct me if I'm wrong here. It seems to me that these extra funding things that they're sending for specific projects, USAID is sending for specific projects, it's really just a way to get a foot in the door. So, and specifically, I want to talk about what happened in Cuba, where I think it was through USAID, they created a social media app because X and Facebook was banned in Cuba. And so the USAID, I think it was USAID, it sounds like it was one of their products, created an app that claimed to be a nativist app for Cuba. And then it would get everybody interested through talking sports and great pictures and things like this. And then once it reached a certain threshold, it then switched over to encouraging revolution. And in many respects, even because of the demographic makeup there, sparking race wars. And that's paid for by U.S. tax dollars.
Yeah, also, I did some digging, and some of the stuff that we're funding now is very interesting. Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion musical in Ireland, $2.5 million for electric vehicles in Vietnam, $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia.
But Leesa, what would Colombians do without an American taxpayer-sponsored transgender opera? I mean, can you imagine the sadness that might bring?
In Peru, a transgender comic book for $33,000. Sex changes and LGBT activism in Guatemala. My $6 million to fund tourism in Egypt. And my personal favorite, $20 million to fund Sesame Street in Pakistan.
Right. So it's actually Afghanistan, I think, not Pakistan. I've actually watched some videos of that. The product exists. This Sesame Street for the Arab Muslim world. It actually exists, and it's I think I could do a better job with about $2,000. I really do. I think I could do it. It's all done on green screens and whatnot, and it's really it's pure propaganda, from what I gather. It's from what I can tell. It's all pure propaganda. It's
Well, there is a place for this. There is a place for helping another country with wells and food, and there is a place for doing that, because if we step out of that, China's going to step right in, and they've actually been doing that. They've actually been stepping into Africa as we've been stepping out of Africa. But some electric cars and tourism and sex changes and comic books, and it's just, I think it's gotten crazy, which is why they've made it smaller and put it under the State Department. At least that's the last.
well, that's the plan, isn't it? To put it under the State Department and shrink it. Now, there's politicians and activists and media decrying that Elon Musk has somehow launched a soft coup against the USAID and in terms of State Department. And it's such nonsense. It's such again, we're coming back to this base level reporting of it. From what I can tell, and I may be wrong on this, I don't have all the information, is that there's a group of 6 young fellas who are very, very clear about coding, how to use systems and whatnot. And they're in there and they're looking for things that are blatantly wasteful, and they're highlighting them because, as Musk posted the other day, not a single request for funds has ever been rejected through the entire USAID thing for the last 10 years or something along these lines.
Well, that's true at the Treasury Department. I didn't realize he said that through USAID. He talked about nothing has been turned down at Treasury.
Right. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. So you've got people looking at what are blatant wastes of blatant waste of taxpayer money, or examples that are not good stewardship of taxpayer.
Yeah, a lack of
money.
good stewardship. It's like you're playing with the, monopoly money. But, the taxpayers are coughing up their money and they're hoping the government does something good with it. I'm not sure that funding Sesame Street in whatever country is what they had in mind.
Well, that's the thing. Is, you've got...
No, I am sure that is not what they had in mind.
Of course not. Of course. You've got this ballooning debt that the country has, and a deficit. And I think it's something ridiculous, like each taxpayer in the US is on the hook for about $300,000 or something, just based on the national debt. And nobody seems willing to cut this down and get it back. Its funding levels basically stay the same or grow year on year. And you have this situation where people are crying and screaming in the streets because, they're looking at projects. Let's cut funding to, as you point out, Sesame Street in the Middle East. I mean, there's not a value there. There's not a value to the American taxpayer there. But what happens is, because the spending doesn't come down, either one of two things happen. Number one, the American people need to be taxed more. That's one option. The other option is that the services that they already get become worse. Those are the only two things.
Exactly.
So Americans are either having to pay more, which means that their lives are measurably worse, or they have worse services, which means their lives are measurably worse. Either way, the average American taxpayer's life is measurably worse because of the activities of USAID and other agencies. And Leesa, is there a way out of the hole?
Well, I think so. This DOGE thing has the left really crazy. And I think as Musk keeps on and on and on and on, they can try to stop him in the courts, but it seems like a good portion of the American people are behind this.
There's going to be kind of an appetite for it. I mean, if Musk and DOGE can save a specific amount of money, says, look, we've stopped this money being wasted. This money can either go into something else, or, we just don't need to collect it. And woe betide any future politician of either stripe that tries to stop that particular avalanche. Leesa K. Donna, thank you ever so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Mark.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.